Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jen Marples Show. Today, I have a beautiful guest. Her name is Shirin Etessam, otherwise known as Queen Shirin, because she's a friend of mine. And I don't know, Queen Shirin, it just sounds great, and she loves it, so we're rolling with it. So Queen Shirin is on the podcast today, and she is a friend. And why I love her so much is that, well, first of all, she's amazing, and you're gonna see that as we go through our conversation today. But she believes in the transformative power of play. And I find that concept to be so fascinating. And you've heard me say it here on the show before that fun is really important. You've heard it from Ophie, who was on the show. She told me I needed to have more fun this year, Shireen. Like that's one of my things this year in my chart is that I need to have more fun. So I'm glad we're talking. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a background of Shireen before we get started. Shireen is an entrepreneur, media executive, a master storyteller, and an author, and she has written the book called Free to Be, a 6-week guide to reclaiming your soul. Let that sink in. And it features easy to digest daily exercises that will lead you toward a life of deep fulfillment and lasting contentment. So I know you all are going to just love our conversation because so many of you listening, myself included, all in midlife. We all want to know our deeper meaning and our deeper purpose. A lot of us are stuck. A lot of us are in an exploratory phase, even if you're kind of going off in one direction. We're all wondering, are we really doing the thing that we're meant to do? And are we really tapped in? So Shireen is here to walk us through her book and to tell us how also, she's also an entrepreneur in midlife. So we're going to kind of kill two birds with one stone because she was doing one thing that she's still kind of doing on the side, but she's really launching a whole new platform and programs around Free to Be, which is the book. So I'm so excited, Shireen, to have you on the show today. And welcome. And let me just hold up your book. So everyone here, if you watch this on YouTube, you get to see this beautiful book, which is normally on my wall of women behind me as I record this. So for today, it's off the shelf and just in my hand. So with all that, Shireen, welcome. And I can't wait to dig into a great conversation with you.
Yay. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
So excited to have you. So let's get cracking.
Yeah.
Because I know when I mentioned your book subtitle, which is a 6-week guide to reclaiming your soul, women are going to be like, well, what does it mean to reclaim your soul? So let me just ask you that question first. And then I want to ask you how you got to, becoming an author and writing the book. So what does reclaiming your soul actually mean?
It means getting back in touch with your true essence. We all are fully in our true essence, living from our soul at a really young age. You look at babies and toddlers, you can feel their soul, from miles away. And as we grow up and start adulting, we lose touch with that true essence. And it could be anywhere from, having a detachment from it to a clear disassociation from it. And the more we adult, the further we move away from it. So it's really getting back in touch with that true essence. And the reason I call it, I define it as your true essence is really to kind of extract the woo-woo out of it, because you say soul, you say spirit, and people either put it in the realm of woo-woo or religion. And once you read my book, or hopefully through this conversation, you'll get that it's anything. Well, I shouldn't say it's anything but it is super practical.
I love that. So before we dig into the book, then you are an entrepreneur, you're in midlife, and you run a digital agency, and you've done a lot of things in your time, like a lot of us have done. So how did you get from A to B? Like, where did the book come from? How did that come to be? And how did you birth it into the world?
Really good question. So I did all the things that we all do, checking off many boxes and getting the awards and the accolades and such. And at the end of 2013, I experienced a massive breakup with my then partner. And we had been together for 13 years, and we had been dear, dear friends for 9 years prior to that, and 22 years of love, friendship, and all of that disappeared within 20 minutes. And it really propelled me into a tremendous amount of darkness and soul searching. And what was really interesting is that on the outside, I had a perfect life. You know, we had the homes, we had the cars, we had the community, and I didn't even realize how muted I had become, just because I was doing what I thought I should be doing and living the life that everyone envied or was in awe of. And I'm like, I say it in the book, I'm walking dead, for a good 5 years between 2008, I would say, to 2013. I was just gone. And I didn't even realize it up until the time poop hit the fan. And then it all came crumbling down, and I had to really reinvent myself. And so I spent 6 years doing that. And I basically wrote the book that I wish I had when I was at that crossroad.
Well, I guess necessity is the mother of invention. And I'm sensing a theme with so many of the guests I've had on the show, because you're not the first and last to talk about burnout and sort of big life transitions and ticking the boxes and doing all the things that society has said that were going to make us happy and fulfilled. And you woke up one day, and obviously you had sort of a breakup that kind of accelerated all that and brought that awareness. I had my own breakdown of the same thing. Like something will happen if you don't pay attention. In the case of me, it was just, I couldn't go on as yelling, screaming at my kids. My listeners have heard this ad nauseum, but I didn't like the person I was becoming, and I could barely get out of bed. And so these inflection points are now that they turn into opportunities. So you sort of turned your pain into your purpose. So
absolutely, I always say that I do my best work on my knees, because you're vulnerable and you're like, well, that didn't work, and you're open to opportunities. Whereas I think that when one is comfortable, we don't always seek those growth opportunities.
No, and they say too, right? And you've probably heard this, that actually being comfortable is sort of comfortable enough is kind of like a death sentence, because things are just okay. You probably know something is brewing under the surface, but nothing crazy has happened. Like a breakup didn't happen, or your health didn't fail, or, someone died, it's there, you can feel it. So you kind of stay and you don't make any changes. And they said that's like the most dangerous place to be, because when you are on your knees, shit has to change, and you got to go deep, and you got to figure stuff out.
And the thing is, and I'm sure you've heard it, and I talk about it in chapter 1 of my book, but your brain really believes anything you tell it repeatedly. So if at some point you start lying to yourself, like, I'm fine, I'm fine. Anytime a friend of mine said anyone who says I'm fine with an inflection at the end, they're not fine. But you keep telling yourself that, your mind believes it. So you believe your own lies. And, it takes something major often for people to wake up. And that was my calling, which I didn't at all expect. Like, you think about kind of your trajectory of your life, you're not thinking like, oh, well, I'm going to be with this person for 13 years and then I'm just going to be flattened and I'm going to be thrown into a really dark abyss and I'm going to figure out how to crawl out of it on my own and then write a book. But there I was.
So there's so much to unpack, but let's go through the process of the book.
Yeah.
Because it's so helpful. My husband is actually halfway through it, so he's going through all the lessons in the book.
Love that.
And this is I'm going to be taking a little vacation in June, and so this is going to be one of my books I take when we go up to Mammoth. So when I go up to Mammoth, I can read about 4 books, 5 books in a week because there's no Wi-Fi and there's nothing to. It's such bliss. It is. Let me just say this: it's such bliss to not be around Wi-Fi. Just to have books because I love to read. So you're wanting this. I'm going to complete it up there anyway. But I've heard you speak about it, but everyone listening has not. So take us through sort of top line what the book is about and how women right now can use the book, use the tools to have a deeper understanding of their lives and make changes. I know everyone wants to make changes and optimize, and women are pivoting, and there's a lot of stuff going on in midlife. So take us through how this book can help us.
Would love to. So overall, I wanted to make sure that I wrote a book that felt like a pocketbook that you could take anywhere and that it would be super practical and immersive. And I think that is super, super important because I think that if you are reading something and understanding it conceptually, it's completely different than experiencing it, being immersed in it. So I really encourage the reader to experience the book and not just read it. And there's ways that we can do that. And I think that it's great that you are reading it when you have downtime, because then you could double down on it. But I wrote it for the busiest person in the world so that you can have these snackable guides as you go about your day. And again, super practical, easy to read, but very intentionally that way. So 6-week process, 21 days and 21 days, 21 days for the first half of the book, 21 days for the second half of the book. Why did I choose 21 days? Because there's been a lot of research on habits being made or broken within 21 days. It doesn't work out exactly as 21 days, but it's a good marker. So the first half of the book is dedicated to undoing a lot of habits that don't work for you. And the second part is about creating those habits that do. So chapter 1 is all about detoxing our minds, because that's the biggest culprit. You talked about unplugging. That is certainly one way. And I talk a great deal about mindfulness, which truthfully is actually mindlessness. It's getting rid of one's thoughts. And I talk about different ways of doing that. Some people like to meditate, but not everybody are meditators. So what are the other ways of doing it? And I spend a considerable amount of time talking about consumption, what we allow and don't allow in our minds, which I think is super, super important, especially as we all spend our days, or the majority of our days, on screens. So that is chapter 1. Chapter 2 is about detoxing our hearts. And when we talk about our heart, a lot of people get our hearts and our souls mixed up. Our souls are super wise. Our hearts, I liken it to a little puppy, or there's a reason why they call it your inner child. Your inner child, your inner puppy, all it wants is to be loved, to be acknowledged, to be seen, and to be cared for. So I talk a lot about the primary emotions and how we need to take care of them. But just like you wouldn't follow a child into the woods, I wouldn't necessarily follow one's heart. I would follow our soul. So separating the soul from the heart. And the heart is super, super important to take care of and to listen to and to acknowledge, whether it's fear or joy or love or jealousy, which is kind of a secondary emotion. those emotions need tending. One of my favorite emotions, and this may sound strange, is grief, because it is real, it is honest, it is grounded, and it can teach us so much. I could talk about that later. Chapter 3 is all about detoxing our bodies. And by that, I certainly sleeping well, eating well, exercising well, but it's really shifting our relationship with our bodies as our only vessel through this life. And the truth of it is that we can't think away disease and illness. We can't meditate away any sort of ailments that we have. I mean, it certainly helps, but the body needs tending as the body. And we tend to either ignore it and abuse it up until the time it's like, I need your attention. So it's really shifting everything so that your body is optimal throughout your entire life. So once you have detoxed the heart, body, and mind, you hopefully are a lot closer to your true essence, because what ends up happening is that in that process, you're truly excavating. You're excavating those layers that I talked about that hold us back. It's kind of the white noise that holds us back from our true essence. So by doing that process, you will be closer to your true essence or your soul. And once you've gotten closer to your soul, how do you encourage it to lead? So chapter 4 is all about play, and I can talk about play a lot more, because that is my focus now for various reasons. But I found play in my darkest hour, and I found play by being dragged out. You know, the can Shirin come out and play? I was literally dragged out by my friends and made to play, and it made all of the difference. And I can talk about play. This part of the book is really near and dear to me, and seems to have resonated the most with people. Chapter 5 is all about finding your true north. One soul is different than what I call spirit. You could call it Jesus, you could call it God, you could call it your higher self, universal consciousness. Our souls are our unique imprints in the world. Spirit is all there is. So it's the dance between the soul and the spirit, which has us connected with everything else. And then chapter 6 is about rewriting your story. And it's not like, okay, good luck with that. I actually have, there's a Venn diagram, which some of your listeners might be familiar with, which is called Ikigai. It's a Japanese Venn diagram for figuring out your reason for living, your raison d'etre. And I walk you through that, and then I send you on your way. So, and truly, the truth of it is, and in the West, I know we all want quick fixes. There is no journey's end. You know, the Buddhists use the lotus as a symbol because it's ever unfolding. There is no end. You get to a certain level and then something else opens up. So yeah, the West is just really, really funny about, like, you know, all the quick tips and all of that, which is great. I mean, I love that as well. But once you are on your journey, you are on your journey for life. It isn't, you know, I'm going to do this over the summer and then I'm going to do life. This is life unfolding.
Wow, there's so much there to unpack. And because you just talked about the quick fix, that really spoke to me, because for someone who's done work on herself since I was like 30 and I'm 54. I mean, it is never ending. And I think a lot of women, people in general, it's not even just women, think that if you kind of start something, there's just, I'm going to do a thing and then it's going to be all better. And then I'm going to be going about my business and never, like you're saying, tending, you continue to grow and we're moving human beings and ever evolving. So it's not this linear path of like A to Z. You read this book and you're done. It's a constant process and you get to these next levels and then you keep expanding. That's why it's always comfortable. And that's why all the women I talk to, it's like, I'm scared every day. And people might go, well, you've done X, Y, and Z, but when you're doing all these new things and stepping out of your comfort zone and your personal life is changing and relationships and dynamics, and it is this ever evolving thing. So we're not, I guess everyone wants to reach some type of homeostasis, but I don't think it actually exists, right? That's what you're saying. And I think it's really important to note because everybody, I like to joke that you're not going to just take pen to paper and journal and Jesus is not going to come down from the clouds and tell you what you're meant to do and give you your life plan. It's constantly, right? It's constantly checking in and tapping in and doing the work.
Yeah,
That's really powerful.
I absolutely believe that there are people in this world on different levels of consciousness. And I see it and feel it. And if we can see the world that way, there's the people that we can learn from, and then also people who we can have compassion for because they haven't been through what we have been through, and they may or they may not. And it isn't because they're being stupid or stubborn or whatever. It's just that they don't have that level of consciousness yet, and may. So instead of shaming them or criticizing them, to really lend a hand. So
I'm glad you said that too. I call it sort of bless and release because I don't get miffed by people who haven't done their work and they're not at the same level of consciousness, let's just say, because I've done massive excavating. I still have tons more work to do. I'm not perfect. No one's perfect. But I can say after all this and all the work and all the stuff that I've done, if I see somebody who's in pain and they're lashing out at me or they're, it's like you can, any troll on the internet or anything like that, has nothing to do with us. So I just, I bless and release.
yeah.
It was like that whole yogic philosophy. I did yoga teacher training 100 years ago because I love yoga and I love the philosophy of it all. And it's the 4 locks and 4 keys. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I've mentioned it here before, but yeah, so it's if you feel jealous of somebody, it's instead of feeling jealousy, like what can you learn from those people and, celebrate them. And then if you see somebody who's in pain, you don't need to be dragged into their pain, but you can notice their pain from afar and basically kind of, bless them from afar and, wish them well. But you also don't have to impact yourself. And it was all about, maintaining your own equilibrium and balance. We could go off on this for hours. I love talking about this kind of thing. But let's talk about the importance of play, because I know that is one of your big platforms. You speak about it, you train about, you train teams and companies, and people are really eating that up. So what is, for just general listeners, not for, companies necessarily, but what is the power and importance of play?
So much there. So I am on a mission to have people realize, adults realize, you don't need to tell children, the importance of play, and for it to shift from feeling frivolous. Looking at you, I was going to say frivolous to fabulous, but certainly that, but frivolous to fundamental. And what's really interesting is that I've noticed people's mind shift collectively. For example, mental health. It's so easy. Well, mental health has actually, it's been a few years, and now the realm of psychedelics and plant medicine. moved from something that was so taboo to like, wow, there's some benefits there, if it is done right. Mental health was the same. I mean, I remember a time where, people are like, I'm going to go see my therapist. You know what I mean? And now it's like, I'm going to go see my therapist now, like there's a pride in it. Like I am taking care of myself. And I think that spiritual health, I frankly don't think that you could have mental health without having spiritual health. And for me, play is the easiest way to find and sustain a level of freedom and inner power that I haven't found with anything else. And when I talk about play, people are like, oh, well, that's like creativity. Oh, that's like innovation. Oh, that's like productivity. And it is truly at the basis of it. Whether you call it, you hear fun and play, and it does end up feeling frivolous. Like, oh, well, I'll do that when, I'm so tired. I'm going to go and go to the pub with my friends and, play a little. But why is that our only form of play? And then, frankly, when we get to the pub, what do we end up talking about? Usually it's work or relationships, which make us end up drinking more, So it's this weird cycle, which isn't technically play. Play, I like to define play as meditation or mindfulness in action. It is being in one's flow. So why do they call it playing the guitar, right? Playing the piano. You are in the act of creating. You are in the act of allowing your true essence to shine. And so when I talk about play, it isn't, oh, go do cartwheels in the backyard, though if that is your idea of play, please do cartwheels in the backyard. There's so much to understand about play. One of the biggest things to realize is that we don't all play the same way. The same way, like there's the love languages, there are also the play personalities, because what may feel like love to you, which might be in the form of giving your time or gifting someone, may not be the same for another, who may need, physical affection. So there's a gentleman by the name of Stuart Brown, and he identified the 8 play personalities. And I talk about the 8 play personalities as if they're the RGB of our TV, or the primary colors. Very few people are just one play personality, and there are, if you read the book or go on my site, you will see all of them. But there is the creator, there's the storyteller, there is the director, there's the athlete, there's the competitor, there is the one that I can't pronounce. Stuart Brown just said, call it the mover and shaker, the kinesist, and the joker and the explorer. So it's really important to find out what your play personality is. And on my site, there's a quick assessment quiz that you can take to find out what it is that really lights you up. So, for example, the collector will really love collecting stamps or collecting dolls. I met a really potent executive director who completely geeked out on her Star Wars collection. I'm the opposite. I do not like to collect. I'm a minimalist. So I'm definitely not that. So what I tell people first and foremost is to figure out what your play personality is and then play accordingly. And it's also a really good way of finding your playmates that way, and possibly your soulmates that way, because if you are a collector play personality and your husband is an explorer play personality, you may not have enough things in common. Though you may also want it to be that you are the collector play personality, but want to learn from a explorer play personality. So there's ways to complement it. But anyway, I'll stop there, because there is, sounds a bit like a oxymoron, but I really want people to take play seriously, because once incorporated, it's one of those things that once you do it, once you understand it, once you have an aha around it, you can't unthink it. And so play is so fundamental in my parenting, in my relationship, in the work that I do. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, that's great. So we're all going to have to go take the quiz to see what our play personality is. And you mentioned, something about it being frivolous, and I've mentioned that before too, of just the acts and act. Fun and play are probably a little bit different, the same but different. But that it's actually like a requirement to live this fulfilled life, that we can't just be heads down, working heads down, parenting heads down, lifing, taking care of our parents. I mean, there's all that stuff, that life stuff that we're dealing with. And we already know that we're the first people to put ourselves last. And so we do everything for everybody else first. And when you say play, it's probably triggering. It's like, well, I don't have time to play. I have all these responsibilities and I've got all this stuff going on. So I love this perspective of kind of flipping that it's first of all, it's necessary. We have to have it. And then we also have these different personalities. And I'm just thinking in my own house, like my husband is definitely a collector, and it drives me crazy because I'm a minimalist. He has like a little shelf. It's tucked away in one of our hutches. It was little, I don't know what the hell is in there, all this little shit. And I would just love to see it gone. And he likes to collect cars and watches, like there, and I'm a purger. So I'm the exact opposite. He just told me yesterday, where was that thing that I put my spoon on? I'm like, oh, I hated it. I threw it away. He's like, what? I'm like, it's clutter. So there's that. But it's fun. So maybe somebody's like the seeker, what is he, like the traveler, the adventurer, and somebody else is like, they just want to geek out on their Star Wars collection. But understanding that those personalities are, understanding them are so important. So everyone's listening and they're busy and they're like, oh my God, Shireen, like there's another book. I don't know if I have time. And it's one more thing to do. If women were just to do, say, 3 things right now to incorporate your book and like being free and, reclaiming their soul, like what would be 3 things that they could start to do right now to get this ball rolling?
First and foremost, don't believe everything you think. And if that, just that statement confuses you, spend time figuring that out. Don't believe everything you think, because our amygdala is, I call her Amy G. Dalla, and she is a nuisance. She is a friend with a worn out map. So she treats every single thing as if it is a crisis, and it is not. So really, when something bothers you, sit with it and see whether it's true. And if it's not, shift it in your mind. And I can talk about that tremendously. Don't confuse your heart with your soul. Your soul is wise. It's that intuitive not you get in your stomach or that F yes, that is your soul talking. So it's really good to distinguish uh, what is our emotion, because emotions come and go. The wisdom of the soul is constant and ever evolving. And then third, play like your life depends on it, because it really does.
Oh my gosh. Let's talk quickly about the heart and the soul. When you'd mentioned that before, I wanted to dig into that a little bit more because I think it's a really important determination. Um, because I was thinking our hearts get broken, our kids break our hearts, our partners break our hearts, people break our hearts all the time. I'm a total empath, so I feel things so hard and so deep. I do. And I go out there and say, don't care what people think. And I firmly believe that. I still care to the degree that something's going to sting me, but it's not going to stop me from doing what I want to do.
Mhm.
And then I love that or distinguishment you made between the heart and the soul, because the soul and that intuition, because if we really get quiet, like you're saying, you're getting quiet, you're going to hear the same stuff over and over again if you let yourself hear it, right? So can you just go into a little bit like how we could all sort of determine whether we're having a heart emotion or a
Yep.
soul emotion?
Well, the soul emotion, that's interesting.
Or and maybe that's not the right terminology. Maybe
Yeah, I would call
the
it, yeah, maybe a soul,
when our
soul,
heart's talking or when our
soul
soul's talking.
signal,
Yeah.
soul
Signal.
tap.
I like that. Signal.
So emotions, anything that is transient, I mean, you think about our hearts, and much like a child, it wants to be held, and then it gets pissed off, and then it's, cranky, and then it's happy, and all of that. So if it feels transient, like if it's going to change, if you feel different in the morning than you do at nighttime, and the next day, those are emotions. If there is a constant that stays with you and really feels like it comes from the gut, not the amygdala. So it isn't this, I know my mother-in-law hates me. That's Amy just chatting. But it's more so I'm meant to, I'm really pulled to travel to Australia. I don't know why, but I'm really like, that is your soul talking, or you're really good at something, that is your soul's gift, that is your unique gift. That's how it's distinguished. And that there is a level of clarity when when one is living from the soul, then there is one who caters to one's emotions all the time. When you look at somebody, when somebody is super grounded, it's usually because they're in their flow. And people who tend to be highly reactive are the ones who are at the mercy of their emotions. Again, emotions are incredibly important. If Rumi's guest house, I have this visual. Rumi's guest house basically says, the poem says, let all the emotions in because they're there to teach you something. I have an analogy of being on, imagine a bus or a plane, where you're not the pilot. So, universal consciousness, Allah, God, Jesus, your higher self is the pilot. Your soul, is the co pilot. Emotions come, great, come on in, sit in the back of the bus, sit in the back of the plane. You are welcome. You are on, along for the ride, along for the flight, but you do not get to fly the plane. You do not get to drive the bus. And that is how I dance with my soul and my emotions. I acknowledge, like, if I talk about grief, grief is actually the most soulful emotion because it is so deep and it is so wise. I almost feel like grief is a messenger from your soul to your emotions that just says, hey, wake up, look at this. This is life. No BS. So I could talk about that also for a very long time, but I'll stop there.
Well, that's also really powerful because I think we're afraid to be in those deep emotions, the grief especially, because it's scary, and I think people are afraid to get swept up in it and swept away. Um, and we're, society wants us to be strong, and you're powering through, and you're doing all that, but it's going to catch up with you. It's if you've gone through it, I've gone through it, right? So it's going to
I
catch
want to
up.
say, if you think about grief the same way that Brene Brown talks about vulnerability, grief can actually be sitting with your grief can actually be the most powerful and the wisest thing you've ever done. The same way that your vulnerability can be your absolute strength. So,
Ooh, I love
yeah.
that. On my last podcast, I had mentioned I was answering listener questions, and one was, we're all in midlife. So people's parents have passed, they're declining, kids are leaving the nest. Some are like, they're leaving college and they're like fully on their own. So there's a lot of transitions happening right now, and there's a lot of grief. And I'm doing it to myself too, where women are kind of like, well, you've got to be strong for things, but I'm so happy for somebody. Like in the case of the kids, you're so happy for them, but you get to be two things at once. You get to be happy for them. You also get to be really fucking sad about
Mhm.
your baby leaving the nest. And I think we just need to talk about it more. And I know I need to sit with it. I've been busy kind of keeping the head up and keeping the ship going towards the shore. And I know that, we planned a trip couple days after graduation, so I can sit with my grief, sit with the transition and acknowledge it, because I'm not going to toss it aside. And in the case, I just have to say one thing. I think women experience things different than men, because my husband's like, oh, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, for a woman, he came out of my womb. Like, I feel like an arm's being ripped off. I get to be sad.
You get to be sad as long as you need to be sad. When I was going through the grief of my breakup, and the West baffles me because everything is like, has to be like wrapped up really quickly. And it seems like the person that lets go the fastest is the winner. But the truth of it is that you just end up gifting your crap forward, to your next relationship. So it's really, really, really important to sit with your grief and work through everything, so that you present yourself as the cleanest and clearest slate to your next relationship. But because we have one emotion, it doesn't mean the other emotions go away. I mean, I've had my biggest belly laughs when I've been in my deepest grief. One does not negate the other, and when you realize that, when we realize that we are not our emotions, we are not our lives, we are not our that everything is in passing, and what is constant is one's soul, then we don't end up being attached to one thing or another, or so if I'm afraid, I sit with that fear. If I am happy, certainly sit with that. If I am curious, I sit with that. And I don't make things good or bad. I just allow them to work through me. And that is super, super important.
Such a great perspective. And one other thing I wanted to touch on, I could talk to you for 5 hours, was this. And it's really important because women are in transition right now. Women are pivoting. I'm encouraging women all the time to, listen to your soul and, follow your heart. It's like, we get to set the rules for this second chapter, and, we get to do what we want. But I love what you said about, or reflecting even on the fact that we all kind of want this solution and something's going to come overnight, but it's allowing yourself that time to figure things out, and how you're living your life or your business or whatever, your relationships right now. It's not going to be what it is in 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, and just realize that. But it's starting the process, and the awareness is what I'm hearing you say. And I love this, that I've talked about it on the show before too, this concept of duality. Like, two things can be true at once. You can be extremely sad and really happy at the same time.
Well, and part of the beauty of also mindfulness, if you get to, I mean, this is one of those things also that when you've been through the process of it, you can't undo it. Like, I live my life, I experience my life. There's that saying, that you are not a person, a human with a soul. You're a soul having a human experience. When you've done the work of the work, there is this detachment or separation from, like, I am very committed to my life and everything within it. But there is a certain detachment from it, so that I never end up getting so sucked in that I can't pull myself out. So if something happens that is incredibly painful, I experience it, but I experience it from a place of awareness. And that separation is gold. And you can't get to it until you get to it. And you can't get to it unless you commit that that is how you are going to live. And when you live that way, everything else falls under that, and life truly becomes this like magical mystery tour, that is ever evolving. So instead of checking boxes, you're in this realm of discovery, which I'm in now and completely love it. Like, I can't get enough. And it also, for me, I feel like it does away with ages. Our mutual friend coined the word perennials. I mean, I feel like I'm that way. People talk about retirement. My dad did not ever retire. He worked up until the second he had his stroke, because he lived his passion. And I absolutely plan to do the very same. I want to go out blazing.
Oh my God, this is such a great way to kind of wrap this up and end it. I feel the same way. I love perennials, and that's, Gina Pell, thank you for coming up with that. And it also made me think of something Chip Conley had said, and he's going to be the first man I have on the show, by the way. I'm interviewing him in the fall.
A very good one to have as your first.
But when he talks about age, he had a reflection of, he feels that I am every age that I've ever been. And I've mentioned this and I've written about this too, based on this concept of, okay, 50, I'm physically 54. But when, I was driving back from Cal Poly with my son and we were listening to Pearl Jam, I was 21. When you're back in your family home with everybody, you're 16. When you're at work and you're in your flow, I'm every minute of 54, because it's like every bit of that experience comes into that. When you're maybe on the dance floor with my husband, we're back to being 26, 27 when we fell in love, so we're all those ages. And I just love that concept it's that perennialism. It's like we're all the ages we've been. And I'm going to go out. My mom is still working. She had a heart attack, in January, and she's fine. And everyone's heard me talk about it, but she was back at work in a week. And she's not going to stop. She loves it because she loves what she does. My dad retired, and I've seen that. You see what happens when That's another whole episode because you got to be tied into something in purpose and just you can't garden and go running every day. That's not a way to live a life. And that's why we're here. You're here on this show because you're not too fucking old and you are every age you've ever been. We're perennial and it's never too late. And actually, it's the right time right now to get in touch with who you are and what you want and start to listen. So I'm going to hold the book up again because you guys are all going to want to get this. Do you have an audiobook too? Does this come in audio form?
I do. And it's my voice.
Oh, awesome. So it comes in audio, so it's free to be 6-week guide to reclaiming your soul. So I will link all that in the show notes. Before we wrap, everybody answers or finishes the sentence. I'm not too fucking old to
play.
Yeah, like that was a hard one. We had to really dig deep for that one.
But seriously, like play, just try it out. Try it out. Go and do what you did as a 5-year-old. It will change your life.
Oh my God, I love that. All right. So where can everybody find you, buy the book, and come into your world?
So my website, ShirinEtessam.com, just my name.com, and my book, Anywhere Books Are Sold. I'm very grateful for that. So whether it's Amazon, Barnes and Noble, hopefully your indie bookstore, indie bookstores online, easy to find.
Awesome. So we have our reading assignment for the summer. Fabulous ladies, we are going to do this. We're going to reclaim our soul. We're going to be more playful. We're going to commit to it. So I have all that linked in the show notes, but it's been such a joy to have you on the show today. I could talk for 3 more hours. I mean, I know you and I, because we actually have talked for that long. So
I'm like, yeah, I'll be right there.
For the sake of, brevity, and brevity in my world is like an hour. Everybody knows I can't shut up. So we'll let you go for now, but thank you for being on. It has been an absolute joy to have you on the show today.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.